We have three boxes here, red, green, and blue, and they're just defined with background colors and borders. And we want to control them to be either in a row or a column. So the first thing we need to do is in the container, we need to set display to flex. And then if we just save and refresh now, we can see it already switches to a row because row is the default mode for display flex. We can change that with a flex direction. So the default is row, and so if we refresh, nothing changes. But we could switch that to column, and now it switches to a column of boxes. You may notice that the container is still flexed all the way across the body, and that's because the body is still set to not display flex. So we can actually change the body as well to display flex. And then if we refresh now, it switches to flex the entire container because the default, remember, is flex direction row. So it's expecting more elements in the body to be in a row here. So we can change that flex direction as well to be a column instead of a row. And then it switches back here, and the next element will be in a column underneath it. Or we can switch it back to its default, which is row. And that way we get the container flexed in this direction. Once we have our container flexed, we want to change the spacing of these boxes. And so we can do that with the justify content. And the default is flex start. And so if we refresh now, we get the same arrangement as before. Everything's at the start of the box. We can change that though to be flex end. And if we do flex end, then everything goes to the end of the box. The next one that we could do is center, where everyone jumps to the center. After that, we'll show space between. Where we have the outermost ones being pushed to the side, and we get space in between them. So this is really nice if you have like a grid of things you want to display. You can do space between. Or if you want some space around the outside, then you can do space around, and that gives a little bit of space. It's half the space as the internal around the outside. And finally, there is space evenly, which puts the same amount of space between each of the boxes. So these are the different ways you can arrange things in a row. Remember that justify content is in the axis of the flex direction. So let's go through these again, but change the flex direction to column. And remember that we have to change the body to row. I'll show you what happens if we refresh now. We don't get it flexed all the way here because the body is also set to column. But if we change the body to a row, there we go. Now we have it flexed this way. So justify content is in whatever direction the flex direction is. This is the axis of the flex direction. And so space evenly, we'll space it evenly, or we can show, for example, space end, we'll push it all the way to the bottom. So these all work in whatever direction the flex direction is set. We have some boxes of different heights and widths now, and the flex direction is row, and the justify content is space between. To align things in the off-axis direction, we use align items. So the axis direction is row, so the off-axis is going to be the column. So align items, and the three most common ones are flex start, which puts everything at the start or top in this case. Flex end, which puts everything at the bottom, so all the bottoms line up. Or center, so the center in the off-axis direction lines up. Remember that the axis direction is set by flex direction, so if we set the flex direction to column now, and we have to go up one level and change the axis direction of the body as well. Now, the axis direction is here in the column, and the off-axis direction is centered based on align items. So we could flex start that, for example, or flex end it, and it's in the off-axis direction, or center it. So the center of the boxes in the horizontal direction are centered this time. We have three different colored boxes here, and they're flexed in this container. The container has a flex direction of row, so that's the axis direction, and there's space between it using justify content. And then we have align items center, so in the off-axis direction, we have them centered. Now let's say we just want to deal with this red box right here. That's box number one, and we can align self, and we have a few options. First of all, we can say flex start, and if we refresh, that will jump to the top. So we can move just one of the boxes by aligning the self. We could also do flex end, or center. And they're all centered, but it centers itself now. We can also do align self stretch. And right now, this just looks like it moves it to the top, but that's because we're fixing its width and its height. If instead we set a min height, then it would stretch itself in the off-axis direction. So height will override the stretch. But if we align self stretch with a min height, it will stretch in the off-axis direction. Which means if we change this flex direction to row for the body and column for the container, now we get it, and it's trying to stretch itself in the off-axis direction, but we have that width fixed, so let's change that to min width. And so now it has a min height and a min width, and it will try to stretch itself in the off-axis direction. So we have our 3 boxes that are flexed all the way across the screen, but what if our container had a width to it? So we could set a width to 150 pixels, and now it smushes the boxes so that they fit within the container. To get around that, we can set the flex wrap style. Now, the default is no wrap, and so that gets us exactly what we have here. It tries not to wrap things and instead smushes them to fit. But we could set that to wrap. Now it wraps them so that they come one after another. This is a little hard to see with the sizes we have, so let's make a few more red boxes here. And now you can see it's wrapped them instead of just putting them in one row or trying to smush them. Remember, the space between them is controlled by this justify content. So we could, for example, say flex end for justify content and take everything to the end here, and it still wraps normally. And then there's one more wrap we might use, which is wrap reverse. And that will reverse the order of everything in the container, which is kind of a neat idea. It starts at the bottom and then wraps upwards. Here we have a red, green, and blue box inside of a container, and they're all set to have a min width of 50 and a min height of 50. But let's say we wanted this green one to grow to fill the size between the red and the blue. We can set that with the flex grow property, and let's just set it to 1. It can be any integer, but because the other 2 aren't set, if we refresh now, it will grow to 1, and the other 2 will remain at their min width. Now we can set the others as well. So let's say we set this red one to be a flex grow of 2. Now it will try to be about 2 times the size of this green one. And we can do the same for the blue one. So let's say we set flex grow here to 10. It will try to be 10 times the size, though it's constrained by how wide it can get. We can also do this by setting flex. So flex and flex grow will accomplish almost the same thing. You can see that it tries to push it even further. So flex will get you closer than flex grow.